the real world application of history and intercultural communications, specifically in the Russia Ukraine conflict happening right now out there. They've had a long history and it's really, flared up now. Intercultural communications is when two cultures, even, two similar cultures like Russia and Ukraine who have shared a lot of history dating back to the USSR, they're two distinct cultures now. Russia thinking they're the dominant culture, thinking that they should be in charge of Ukraine. Ukraine wanting to do their own thing and wanting to stay independent. So they're two conflicting cultures trying to communicate to each other, and it's just not working out great. The grand narrative, one of the main talking points I've chosen here, it's the worldly effect. It's what is this in the big scheme of things? It's overarching, all encompassing, story of a nation or humankind in general. So really, every conflict that has taken place on the world stage is part of a grand narrative. Every single war, Vietnam War, both world wars, all of that is part of this grand narrative. It shapes the world that we're in. And as soon as Russia invaded Ukraine, they put themselves into the grand narrative because that single action shifted the world stage, as we'll get into a little bit later on. But a lot of agriculture out there and a lot of money is being devoted into these areas from other countries to make sure that agriculture and perhaps even the freedoms that Ukraine is fighting for, remain intact. So specifically for Russia, Ukraine invasion though, as I mentioned, a lot of countries have, come to the Ukraine's aid. They've contributed, but some of those financial contributions or military contributions are straining these countries. These two countries, as I just mentioned, huge in agriculture. So if it happens one way or another, perhaps, even maybe if one country doesn't take over the other, if there is like perhaps big fallout from the war, you're going to have a ton of agriculture that's going to be ruined, and the world's really going to be reeling trying to replace that. Right, it's right here. The two countries, 33% of the world's wheat supply, a third of it. You think we produce a lot of wheat out here in America, but just absolutely nothing compared to what they do. 25% of the barley, it's huge. All of these are used to feed the world, and it's not just directly, bread or whatever, but it's, excuse me, they're ingredients in other foods. 75% of the world's sunflower seed oil. A possible worldwide food shortage and really starvation for an entire world is kind of what it's at play right now. So the second one is absent or altered history. Absent history, the history that's kept out of the history books. Doesn't mean that didn't happen, but for whatever reason, history books have decided that it just wasn't important enough to talk about. It still existed, it still happened, but they just don't feel the need to report on it per se. Then altered history, the past has changed to fit a particular worldview or interest, or propaganda or something along those lines. But it's altered so that a lot of times it's altered to make someone look better or to make a particular group seem like they're on the winning side of things. Or perhaps not the winning side, but the right side of things, that they weren't the aggressors, which is what's happened in Russia. As soon as it took place, Russia, as soon as they got into Ukraine and engaged with the Ukrainians, they were like, oh, no big deal, it's just a routine training exercise. And in fact, no, it's a full-scale invasion, but they're trying to alter the history as it's happening. So they're writing down in their papers, in their media outlets, they're covering it as if it was a training exercise, which is altering that history right there. It's not the first time Russia has done this, though. Stalin once said that 10 million people had been killed in concentration and work camps during his reign when he was in charge out there. But many worldly leaders, especially Western leaders, estimate that number is far too low, millions too low. So Russia, everyone knows Russia big on propaganda, but big on altering history as well, trying to keep their public image is as good as it is, or as good as it can be, despite doing bad things. And at least here in the States, at least for me, it's easy to see through that. But I could see how, if you are living in Russia, it might look as if it were, hey, everyone else is out to get Russia. We're not doing anything wrong right now. And then concerning Ukraine, and what Russia's intention is, higher ups in the Russian government, in their cabinets, in Putin's cabinet, have said that they're trying to reclaim a lost empire and that Ukraine should be theirs. And it's really not that controversial of a thing, that Russia is the superior country here and that Ukraine just needs to kind of fall in line, per se, and let Russia do their thing, since Russia has earned it, or their part, or they're like Ukraine's part of Russia. So the third thing then is colonial histories. Colonial histories are histories that legitimize the international invasions and annexations of land. And it's not only that, but it's the very history of how a country becomes, right? So, for example, Russia is spoken still today in Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan because they were once under Russian rule, while countries like Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, Puerto Rico, all those Native American, or pardon me, not Native American, Central American, South American countries speak Spanish because they were once inhabited by natives of Spain. Those were the people that came over and settled there first. So that culture is going to keep carrying through. So the colonial history between Russia and Ukraine then is that they were both part of the USSR and were both able to gain their independence from each other, from the USSR, when the USSR ultimately dissolved. However, Russia, as I've mentioned, sees themselves as a dominant force, the dominant country after the breakup of the USSR. And really, since 2014, they've been trying to retake Ukraine as their own, but not as forcefully. Now it's a true invasion and really a war out there that's really been building and building. Some might say it's been building since the split, perhaps Russia wanting Ukraine to stay a part of them. It's been building, and finally they take action in 2014, kind of simmer, and then now, this past year or so, they're taking aggressive action. So that's all I got right there for my presentation.